Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special video. This is actually the debut of a new series that I'm going to be working on called The Best Episode. As that name implies, the goal of the series is to determine what I would consider to be the best episode of whatever show I'm covering in that particular video. Because this is a new series, I figured it would be best to first lay out some of the ground rules before I move on to tackling the topic of today's video. If you don't care about the ground rules and you just want to skip to me talking about today's focus, then here is the timestamp. But I would strongly suggest sticking around for a minute or two just because this is very important. First off, let's quickly establish what I mean when I say the best episode. I'm not talking about my personal favorite, and I'm also not talking about the highest rated episode or the episode that is simply the most exciting or story heavy. What I want to try to do in this series is look at things completely objectively. So what do I mean when I say the best episode? Well, I'm specifically talking about the episode that is objectively the strongest across all of its many aspects. Now, there are a lot of factors to consider when determining what the objective best episode of a show is. Right off the bat, we have to consider the importance that the episode serves in the show. It doesn't have to be of narrative importance, as you don't have to necessarily forward the plot to be a great episode. But it does at the very least have to hold a great deal of importance towards the characters, the themes, or the story. Typically, the best episode will do all of these things, but that isn't always the case. On top of the episode's importance, obviously writing is a factor. How does the show deliver these key moments? Is the dialogue well written? Does the episode make complete sense? The best episode of a show will more often than not also be the best written episode. Finally, you have how everything comes together in the presentation. These are things like the quality of the episode's soundtrack, the visual storytelling used, the acting, and the editing. Now that we've established what I mean when I talk about the best episode, I can finally start talking about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. For anybody who doesn't know me, it's a well-known fact that this is my favourite show of all time. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is one of those rare shows that never misses a single beat. On top of being one of the best written stories I've ever had the privilege of being exposed to, it's also an incredibly emotional story that manages to explore its characters and its themes on a level that most shows couldn't even dream of. There are only 6 things in the world that I would give a perfect 100%, and this show is one of them. What are the other 5 things, you ask? Well, you'll have to subscribe to find out. Anyways, I'll save the discussion on why this show is such a masterpiece for a later date, but long story short, this video contains major spoilers for the greatest anime in existence. So if you haven't seen this show, then you should get on that before watching this video. Anyways, you have been warned.
You're spoiling it! You're spoiling everything!
How videos in this series are going to work is that right off the bat I'm going to select 3 episodes from the show that I would say are worthy of being called the best episode. I'll give a very quick summary of why each of them have been chosen, and then I will choose what I would consider to be the best of the 3. The focus for the series is not so much to rank these episodes until I find the best one, but instead I would much rather spend the entire video dissecting one of these episodes scene by scene, and really exploring in great detail all the amazing factors that contribute to it being the best episode. Alright, I've explained the mechanics of the series enough already, let's talk about Fullmetal Alchemist. In contention for the spot of best episode are Episode 63, The Other Side of the Gateway, Episode 22, Backs in the Distance, and Episode 54, Beyond the Inferno. Backs in the Distance, while definitely the least popular of the 3, is probably one of the most important episodes in the show due to how it properly sets up the character journeys of both Scar and Winry. On top of the heart-wrenching scene between Winry, Scar, the brothers, and the random gun on the ground, this episode also gives us our first proper look at the events of the Ishvalan Civil War, or from the perspective of one of the war's many victims, Scar. The Other Side of the Gateway, being the penultimate episode of the show, is naturally going to be the one that tries its hardest to really tug on your heartstrings, and it does definitely do that. Ed's sacrifice of alchemy in the opening half of the episode is not only a perfectly fitting end to the journey of one of the best written protagonists in anime, but it beautifully wraps up all of the core themes of the show in a rather extravagant bow. Hohenheim's death at the end of the episode is also one of the most hard-hitting emotional moments of the entire show. It's one of those few scenes across television that will never fail to make me cry. This episode has an entire show's worth of build-up sitting on its shoulders, and it ultimately sets them down and tucks them into bed pretty perfectly. But for me, deciding the best episode was actually an easier task than picking the top 3. Pretty much every episode in the show is fantastic, and so ranking them all compared to one another is no small challenge, let me tell you, and it probably won't be anything I attempt to do for a very long time. However, there is one episode that, despite everything it is up against, sits firmly on top with absolutely no room for negotiation, and that is episode 54, Beyond the Inferno. Alright, so nearly 1100 words into the script and we're finally onto today's topic. I apologise for how long it took us to get here, but rules are rules and they need to be laid out in advance. Anyways, without any further delay, it's time to talk about what is, without a doubt in my mind, the best episode of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Right off the bat, this episode begins with something that is surprisingly rare in this show, a flashback opening. This scene serves as an excellent means of setting up the primary focus of this episode, that being the relationship between Roy Mustang and Riza Hawkeye. Being set shortly after the conclusion of the Ishvalan War of Extermination, it reminds us that their relationship was one forged in tragedy. This isn't a perfectly cheerful relationship, it's built on a shared sadness, a shared grief, and most importantly, a shared guilt. The most standout dialogue in this scene for me happens close to the beginning, where upon learning that the body Hawkeye is burying is that of an innocent child, Mustang says,
"Let's go. The war is over now."
To which Hawkeye responds by saying that the only part of the war that's truly over is the fighting. Mustang doesn't respond. It's particularly powerful knowing just how much this event shapes these characters moving forward. She's right. The war isn't over. Not for the victims, and also not for the people who bear the same guilt as these two. If anything, this scene encapsulates the core underlying motivation of both of these characters. Atonement. A desire to do better and to set right the injustices that they played a role in bringing about. They know that they can never truly make up for all of the atrocities that they took part in, but they still want to do as much as they can to help those that their country wronged over the years. The other purpose that this scene serves is it further shows just how far these characters are willing to go for the sake of each other's happiness. Mustang is extremely reluctant and emotional at the thought of causing Hawkeye any pain, a feeling that will play a huge role in helping him later on in this episode, but nevertheless he agrees to burn away the writings on her back, permanently scarring her just so that she no longer has to bear this terrible secret that was forced upon her by her father. To them, this is one step forward towards the better world that they hope for. Flame alchemy, being the most dangerous and destructive alchemy ever conceived, could lead to the suffering of countless more people should it ever fall into the wrong hands. In fact, the show isn't even sure whether or not Mustang is the right hands for such a power. It's Hawkeye's belief that removing its secret from the world will remove the ability for flame alchemy to bring about any more harm than it already has. However, as we will soon see in this episode, there is still one thing that the power of flame alchemy threatens to destroy completely. And no, I'm not talking about envy, but we'll get to that. Cutting back to the present events of this story, we see, oh, Riza has a gun pointed at Mustang's head. That's a bit of a stark contrast to the last scene, wouldn't you say? Okay, yes, I know, one of them is envy in disguise, but when you show a flashback of these two characters sharing a moment of such emotional depth, and then you cut right to this, I think that's a rather interesting thing to take note of, especially when the driving plot of this episode centers around the relationship of these two characters. It's showing a disconnect, that's all I'm going to say. Just make sure you remember this for later. Anyway, back to the episode.
When it's just us, the Colonel calls me by my first name, Riza.
So you two
You're that close, are you? I lied.
Comedy. We immediately get some great action here. Riza finally gets her moment to shine, and she demonstrates exactly why she is both best sniper and best girl. Envy uses his power in a fairly innovative way and proceeds to force activate Riza's long hair mode, and then the man of the moment finally makes his arrival in rather spectacular fashion.
What in the hell are you doing to my lieutenant?
Now granted, there is something intensely satisfying about seeing Envy, the ultimate bully, be at the complete mercy of somebody who he frequently looked down upon. There's a strong fear in this man's eyes, and although he always talks big, right now we're seeing just how powerless he really is. Being the embodiment of jealousy, it makes perfect sense that he would pretend to have something that he doesn't actually possess. Right now, he's clearly missing that strength he always seems to boast about having. This episode, among many things, gives us a real unraveling to Envy's character, and as we'll eventually see, strength isn't the only quality that he pretends to hold. But despite the satisfaction that comes with watching this microbe of a man suffer, this moment shouldn't be bringing us any joy. There's something sinister about Mustang here, and instead of cheering for him when we thought we would, we're made to share Envy's fear. There's so much intensity to this moment as we effectively get this standoff between the two characters. Mustang's theme crescendos its way up in a way that paints him in a very sinister fashion. His eyes are cold and he has that typical shadow-masked face that anime characters always have when they're about to completely fuck somebody's shit up. This man is angry, and it's not the type of anger that builds up and explodes. No, this anger is cold, calculated, and far more threatening. He's thought about this for a very long time, and now that the moment's arrived, it's clear that he's about to do something catastrophic. And then it begins. It goes without saying that the way Mustang is acting here is equally as monstrous as the real monster that he's fighting. It's a rather interesting thing to think about when you consider his line from a previous episode.
I've been called a human weapon and a monster. Maybe I deserve it, but I can tell you this much. I never feel more human than when I'm fighting real monsters.
It's ironic, isn't it, that in this moment, Mustang couldn't appear any more detached from his humanity. This isn't a fair fight in the same way that a man with a machine gun going up against a rodent isn't a fair fight. And to be fair to myself, calling Envy a rodent in this scenario is both extremely generous to his fighting strength as well as his character. This guy deserves to be punished, but not in this way, and not by this man.
So this is your true form then? You're ugly. Envy means jealousy. That's what your name means, right? I get it. And jealousy is an ugly thing.
That is an awesome line, the first of many in this episode. And so it begins, and well, doesn't this look familiar? It's as though we've seen a similar situation to this before. I wonder if this was intentional. It's almost as if, even with the removal of Envy, we still have an imposter among us.
Don't say that. Don't say those two words.
Okay, in full seriousness now, this episode is about to properly bring in its moral dilemma. What are the consequences for committing an act of murder? Even when it's justified, is doing it out of hate ever a reasonable or morally right way to go about it? Something to note is that the episode never once questions whether or not Envy deserves death. Riza even explicitly states that killing Envy is the only way forward. However, nobody, not even Scar, is on board with Mustang carrying out the act. Is he in the right to kill Envy? Probably yes, but he's doing it out of the wrong motivation. He's too invested in dealing out punishment for the murder of his friend that nothing else matters to him. Mustang isn't simply interested in killing Envy. He wants to torture him, to make his death as painful as possible, and in the process he's destroying himself. This is what I was alluding to earlier. Flame alchemy is not just dangerous as a weapon, but the power it gives its user over its enemies is great enough to twist the user as well. Mustang is abusing this power, and he's turning into somebody he's not. If he wasn't the wrong hands for this power originally, abuse of this power will quickly turn him into the wrong hands.
If it's a fight you want, fine! But first, maybe you should take a good look at your face! Is that the face you plan to wear when you're leading this country? Well, is it? Is that what you want to be, Colonel? Another monster?
If your goal is to lead a country into a better future, is wrongfully burning somebody alive the right way to start your rule? This episode's message goes above and beyond your typical revenge bad storyline. We're not simply being told here that we shouldn't kill people out of revenge because it's the wrong thing to do. It's more nuanced than that. It's not just about what revenge does to other people, but what it does to the person so adamant on enacting that revenge. So, why is this so significant to Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood? Well, at the risk of sounding like the English major that I am, it ties into the story's core theme of humanity in a very important way. Now, a deeper discussion of the show's core theme is a topic that I will save for a much later date, but for now all we need to know is how our main characters typically reflect this theme. Our primary protagonists, Ed, Al, and Mustang, are all strongly characterized by how in touch with their humanity they are. Ed is acutely aware of how weak and insignificant he is, and yet he recognizes that his strength comes from his humanity and his ability to keep moving forward and to accept help from others. Alphonse literally is that help. Like his brother, he refuses to give up on people, and he wants nothing more than to help anybody he comes across, be it friend or foe. And in the case of Roy Mustang, he is strongly characterized by his knowledge of the bonds that humans form to help each other through tough times. There's a reason this episode repeats this flashback to us. It's the same reason why the show insists on repeating this same flashback over and over. This is what Mustang believes, and that's typically what makes him so in touch with his humanity. That's why this episode is important. It's showing us, for the first time, what happens when one of our core characters loses that humanity that had for so long kept them on the right path. But as Ed will say in this very episode,
When we're beaten down, when we stray and fall, we face the challenge again and again. Our loved ones are always there to pick us back up.
just as this episode shows us one of the darker sides of humanity, it's now time for it to show us its strength as well. Mustang is falling, but there are people who care about him who will always be willing to get him back on his feet. His friend, his partner, and even his prior enemy are all there to stand against his actions and keep him on the right path. Ed's primary concern is out of fear for the way Mustang is acting. He doesn't like envy, but he values life above anything, and so is willing to stand in his superior's way to protect his own enemy from unnecessary harm. Scar has some particularly interesting insights, being a man who has already gone down the path of revenge. As he says, he has no right to criticize Mustang, but he also recognizes the potential that he holds as a leader who can move the country in a better direction, so Scar criticizes him all the same. And finally, we have Reza, Mustang's closest confidant. How you choose to read the relationship between these two characters is up to you. I personally subscribe to the widely held belief that they're lovers, at least at some extent. However, the exact details of what they are to each other at this moment isn't at all that relevant. All that's important is that she is the closest person to him. Love or not, there is currently nobody in this world that Mustang cares about more, and so while it is a joint effort, her words are ultimately the ones that pack the most punch.
This will not help, not your country or your friends. This is pure hatred, and I will not let it take you. You're better. I know you're better than that.
And with a mixture of A-grade, heartfelt voice acting and emotion-filled flashbacks to our dearly departed Major Hughes, it's time to bring out the tissues. In the end, it isn't his morals that bring Mustang back, nor the fact that somebody managed to talk any sense into him. No, what brings him back is the knowledge that his actions have hurt the person closest to him, the very person he vowed never to hurt again.
What kind of madness is this? Scolded by a child. Lectured by a man who has been my enemy. And you. I've done it again. I've hurt you. How foolish can one man be?
And with that, the flames of vengeance are snuffed out by the very best parts of humanity. We help each other, we support each other, and because of that, we're able to keep moving forward during our toughest of times. But,
Are you a moron?
it looks like somebody else still has something to say on that matter. Envy is a phenomenal villain, to say the least. He's so slimy and unpleasant, and yet despite the way he appears, he is still somebody who theoretically should have it all. Throughout the show, I found myself genuinely wondering what there was for him to be envious of. He can live forever, he has a great power at his disposal, he can practically get away with anything he wants, and he can change his appearance to be whatever he likes. He doesn't even appear to be jealous of anyone for anything. At a glance, he is, by all accounts, above humanity. But that's precisely the thing. The one thing he is missing. In both a figurative and literal sense, envy lacks humanity. He takes pleasure in the suffering of others, he values power above people, and he also doesn't have any friends.
You're playing shit because you got no friends. And your other waiters, if you want some, I'll give it you.
He doesn't want them, of course, because he doesn't see the value in them. He can't even comprehend the idea of fighting impossible odds, or saving the life of another person, or supporting somebody when they stumble in life, and yet he envies those ideas all the same. This is envy's secret, the thing he tries so hard to hide behind his superiority complex, and the reveal is executed perfectly. He simply cannot understand what's happening in front of him. The very idea that a conflict such as this could be resolved by love, empathy, compassion, and a few touching words, it's completely foreign to him, and it makes him furious. For a minute and a half, he proceeds to cry about it. He kicks up a fuss, yelling and screaming at everybody, to which nobody responds. Everybody just sits, listening, and after a while, Ed finally makes the connection, and says,
Now I see. You're jealous. You're jealous of humans, aren't you? When we stray and fall, we face the challenge again and again, and you're jealous. You envy us because of that.
I've got nothing else to say here. It's just a good reveal. And it also ties in nicely with the theme and emphasizes the strengths of humanity once again. Now, as everybody here hopefully already knows, it's upon this revelation that Envy decides to, let's just say, he takes the coward's way out. If you pay very close attention to the deaths of all the homunculi, you might notice a pattern that's very, and I mean very, interesting. All of the sins die extremely ironic deaths. To name a few, Gluttony dies from being eaten, Sloth dies from overexertion, Wrath dies peacefully of old age, and Envy kills himself. Now, you may be wondering, what does suicide have to do with jealousy? Well, it doesn't really, but when you consider that Envy is primarily jealous of humanity and their ability to keep moving forward, it's rather ironic that he dies because he doesn't want to keep moving forward. Suicide, after all, is the ultimate act of giving up. He's jealous of humans for their ability to keep fighting against the most impossible of odds, and at the end of the day, he stops fighting and out of shame, he kills himself. It's honestly one of the most powerful moments in the show, in that it's able to make you feel such pity for somebody you never once imagined feeling pity for.
Damn it! I've been humiliated. I'm a homunculus. How could this pipsqueak kid see through me?
Now, the episode technically doesn't end there. There's still a little bit to go, but ultimately we've reached the end of the central storyline. But purely for the sake of, having a little more fun, I figured I may as well do a speedrun recap of the remaining 5 minutes, just because while it's not important to why this is the best episode, it's still very good and I love nearly every second of this show, so here we go. Sloth acquires an affiliation for the rock munching and decides that he can't stand looking like the average British person any longer, and so he quickly puts a fix to that. I love the response these soldiers give when they're asked to lend a hand with the literal monster running rampant.
No, we can't do that. We're under orders to kill General Armstrong. General!
All it takes for them to switch sides is for Armstrong herself to just give them an order of her own. It really showcases just how useless the MPs are without any leader around to tell them exactly what to do. I really love how in this scene we get to see both of the Armstrong siblings in their element here. Olivia gets to showcase her leadership skills and her eye for strategy by rallying her own enemies to fight by her side, and as a cohesive unit, mind you. Meanwhile, Alex gets to show off his bravery and fighting strength by directly challenging the one character in this show who is more buff than he is.
Leave him! That's my brother! He's trained better than to be killed like
For the first time in the show, Olivia recognizes Alex's strength, really showing how her opinion about him has changed after fighting alongside him and finally witnessing his bravery in action. And when things are at their most dire for Alexander,
The Major!
oh my god.
My shoulder is back!
Name an anime character more manly than this. I'll wait. Oh wait, I found one.
When people ask, I say I'm a housewife. It does make sense. But today, I've shed that particular disguise. I am an alchemist!
And just when you think this banger of an episode is over and that it's shot all of its shots, even the credits decide to join in on the action. The long-awaited standoff between Slave 23 and the Dwarf in the Flask is about to begin, and it's going to be nothing short of epic.
I expected you would bring those boys of yours along with you. What help do I need from children when I'm dealing with something as lowly as you?
And look at that, look at that! He really is still a Dwarf in a Flask. Very clever fake camera angle show. Very clever. So of course now, the final question remains. Why is this the best episode? Well, we've discussed its importance already. On a plot and character level, this episode is the climax to Mustang's journey, as well as the ending to one of the show's best written villains. On a thematic level, Beyond the Inferno puts the show's core theme of humanity under a magnifying glass. It explores both the strengths and flaws of the human spirit by putting one of our main characters in a situation where he feels compelled to abandon his humanity, and then it shows us just how the help and the care of others can bring us back from even the darkest of places. It contrasts this perfectly with Envy, a character who not only lacks empathy, but downright scoffs at the idea of it, and in his death we see just how much that lack of compassion for others failed him. Next, there's the writing, which is practically always going to be a strong point to any episode of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. This episode not only features some of the most emotionally impactful moments in the show, but it's also chock full of some really amazing lines of dialogue. You've heard many of them throughout the video, but overall this episode pretty much never misses in that department. As for the presentation, there's not much else to show that I haven't already shown. The animation slaps as per usual, the music is amazing, and the voice acting in particular is stronger than it's ever been, and it was already insanely strong before this. Now, I'm not entirely sure as to how I can wrap this up. This is the first in a series of videos that I intend to slowly put out, so it's only natural that this would be the most clunky and most weirdly paced one. If you have any feedback for how you think I could better structure future videos in this series, then please let me know in the comments below. And quickly before I leave, I want to apologize profusely for not having this video out sooner. I promised you all that I would do monthly videos, and unfortunately I was unable to fulfill that completely. I'm trying my best, but you know, like Roy Mustang, I'm a human with flaws. Anyways, the best episode of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is Beyond the Inferno, and there is no negotiation. Anyone who agrees with that assessment is now contractually obligated to subscribe to this channel. Thank you everyone for sticking through this, and I hope to see you all again on future videos of mine. Till then, peace out, I guess. See ya.